Good evening, this is Broadcasting Scotland with the news at 7. I'm Effie Samara, and with me this evening is Chris McCusker.
Evening,
hello, Chris.
Effie,
how are you? I believe we're going straight to Westminster with an announcement from Rishi Sunak coming up very shortly on the emergency measures announced today in regards to the coronavirus. That's him. He's still standing, so if you bear with us, if you just bear with us for a few seconds. Just coming up now.
The ayes have it. The ayes have it. I'm now required under Standing Order number 51.3 to put successively, without further debate, the question on each of the Ways and Means motions numbered 2 to 63, on which the bill is to be brought in, and on the motion on finance, money. These motions are set out in a separate paper distributed
So,
with today's order paper.
Chris, what's your take on what's been happening today? This is obviously events are overtaking us.
It's just an extension to the madness, and obviously. Rishi Sunak, I think he's going to have to massage the figures, but sadly I don't think he's going to have anything to say that is going to inspire anyone with any confidence.
Because we had an announcement from Boris Johnson, didn't we, earlier today?
Yes, and to be honest with you, it was a lot of twaddle.
Of course.
As it normally is from Boris. It was basically saying to people, yes, there's going to be loans available for you. One major question is, who the hell would take a loan at this time?
Exactly. Who would qualify for these loans, and what are the conditions?
Not even the conditions of qualifying. Just who in their right mind would want to take, a loan in this current crisis?
Of course.
It's in stark contrast to governments in Italy, governments in France,
Denmark
who have said,
as well, yes.
Denmark as well, who have said that their citizens will not be out of their pocket.
Exactly. So we've not had any measures to protect citizens,
Absolutely
private
no
citizens, or small
whatsoever.
businesses,
No.
other than obviously the announcement yesterday on making sure that the insurers were protected from.
Yeah, but that's what happens when you live under a capitalist society.
Well, that's the thing, and we're hopefully we're waiting for Rishi. I believe we are now able to.
Secretary Hancock,
Not yet.
Secretary Sharma, Mr. Secretary Shapps, Steve Barclay, John Glenn, Kemi Badenoch.
I think we're just announcing everybody that's
They,
actually
of
going to be introducing that bill.
That's right. Yeah.
Or formulating it anyway. And then there's the usual bow-towing and kowtowing and
Ritual,
all the rest of it, which absolutely
makes us very special.
Reach for the sick bucket.
That's right.
It honestly does. It's enough to give you a dry bulk.
Oh, there's quite a bit of cheering.
Yeah, but the cheering's all coming from the Tory.
Of course it is, and
the cheers are on.
We're still not able to bring you this announcement. It's Rishi Sunak is still not up.
As on the order paper, as members that opinion say aye.
Just going through the business of the different motions of the day, but we will bring this to you as soon as we are able to do so. This is a live broadcast, so.
Motion. Will I do this?
So sadly today we've had an increase, but that was not unexpected, an increase in the people tested and also on the cases detected within Scotland and obviously the wider in the UK. We're talking about over 5,000 people have been tested, which is a good number. Still not really testing as per recommended by the World Health Organization.
No.
We still need to do quite a bit of work on that. And also tragically, we've had 2 deaths in Scotland.
Well, I made the point to Gordon last night. South Korea are testing 20,000 a day.
Oh, are we ready? Or sorry, Chris. This is.
Ministers have the right to make statements immediately after questions and urgent
We are
questions
still,
in
I
the normal
think,
way.
right.
But ministerial statements at other times require my permission. The Government has asked for my permission for the Chancellor to make a statement today at 7 p.m. I agreed to that, but I made clear I did so only on the basis that the House will be the first to hear from him and would not first appear before the media. I turned down requests for urgent questions to the Chancellor, which otherwise I would have granted. I wanted to ensure that elected members had the first opportunity to question the Chancellor. I am deeply disappointed that what I understood to be a commitment has not been honoured. These are difficult and sobering times. I do not want to pick a quarrel with any member. I do, though, want to make crystal clear that my view is that ministers have a duty to report first to this House when major policy changes are announced. The Chancellor has the chance to do the right thing in the future. I call upon him now to give the House an assurance that any future statements will be made to the House first, which is consistent with Section 9.1 of the Ministerial Code. Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to you for allowing me to make this statement. Let me wholeheartedly apologise that I wasn't able to set out these measures to the House first. I can provide the reassurance that you requested, and I hope honourable and right honourable members across the House understand that these are extraordinary circumstances. Mr. Speaker, I want to take the opportunity today to set out for the House the next stage of our economic plan in response to the coronavirus. The coronavirus pandemic is a public health emergency, but it is also an economic emergency. We have never in peacetime faced a fight of an economic nature like this. I know that people are deeply worried. I know that people's anxiety about the disease itself is matched only by anxiety about their livelihoods. In the budget last week, I set out the first stage of our economic response with a £30 billion package to support people and businesses. I promise to do whatever it takes to support our economy through this crisis, and that if the situation changed, I would not hesitate to take further action. As the Prime Minister set out yesterday, we're now approaching the fast growth part of the upwards curve. He has set out the next stage of our public health response, and I want to update the House on the next stage of our economic response. Let me begin by setting out for the House our overarching economic strategy. People should know that the objective of our economic policy remains clear, and our resolve remains firm. We will do whatever it takes to protect households and businesses to get through this and to make sure that the effects do not become permanent. As we develop our strategy, not just today, but over the coming days and weeks, we will be guided by three principles. First, our response must be comprehensive. This national effort will be underpinned by government interventions in the economy on a scale unimaginable only a few weeks ago. This is not a time for ideology or orthodoxy. This is a time to be bold, a time for courage. I want to reassure every British citizen this government will give you the tools you need to get through this. We will support jobs, we will support incomes, we will support businesses, we will help protect your loved ones. We will do whatever it takes. Second, our response must be coordinated. We in government are working hand in glove with the wider economic authorities. Domestically, that includes the Bank of England, the regulators, and the health response. And internationally, I continue to engage with my G7 and G20 counterparts to agree and facilitate a global response. Third, our response must be coherent. It would be easy at a time like this to rush into a response and measures that we found out later had been ill-considered. The single most important test in this House we must set ourselves is to make sure that the actions we take will, in the lives of ordinary people and businesses, make a difference. To apply these principles in practice, we will use fiscal action to support public services, households and businesses. The budget last week set out the first stage, including our commitment to provide the NHS with whatever it needs. In the coming days, I will take further steps with a particular focus on supporting people and individuals. But in response to the updated medical advice yesterday, I can take 3 immediate steps today. First, the government will stand behind businesses, small and large. I can announce today an unprecedented package of government-backed and guaranteed loans to support businesses to get through this. Today, I am making available an initial £330 billion of guarantees, equivalent to 15% of our GDP. That means any business who needs to access cash to pay their rent, their salaries or supplies will be able to access a government-backed loan on attractive terms. And if demand is greater than the initial £330 billion I'm making available today, I will go further and provide as much capacity as required. Yeah. I said whatever it takes, and I mean it. Yeah. That support will be delivered through 2 main schemes. To support liquidity amongst larger firms, I have today agreed a new lending facility with the Governor of the Bank of England to provide low-cost commercial paper. To support lending to small and medium-sized businesses, I'm extending the new business interruption loan scheme I announced at the budget last week, so that rather than loans of up to £1.2 million, it will now provide loans of up to £5 million with no interest due for the first 6 months. Both of these schemes will be up and running by the start of next week. And I am also taking a new legal power in the COVID bill to offer whatever financial further support I decide is necessary. Some sectors are facing particularly acute challenges. In the coming days, my colleague, the Right Honourable Friend, the Secretary of State for Transport, and I will discuss a specific potential support package for airlines and airports. And yesterday, I asked my Cabinet colleagues to urgently convene meetings over the coming days with business leaders and representatives in the most affected sectors to identify other specific opportunities to support them, including possible regulatory forbearance. I repeat, we will do whatever it takes. Second, as well as access to finance, businesses need support with their cash flow and fixed costs. Following the changed medical advice yesterday, there are genuine concerns about the impact on pubs, clubs, theatres and other hospitality, leisure and retail venues. Let me confirm today that for those businesses which do have a policy that covers pandemics, the government's action is sufficient and will allow businesses to make an insurance claim against their policy. But many of those businesses don't have insurance, so we need to go further. I announced last week that for businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sectors with a rateable value of less than £51,000, they will pay no business rates this year. Today, I can go further and provide those businesses with an additional cash grant of up to £25,000 per business to help bridge through this period. Additionally, I'm extending this business rates holiday to all businesses in these sectors, irrespective of their rateable value. That means every single shop, pub, theatre, music venue, restaurant and any other business in the retail, hospitality or leisure sector will pay no business rates whatsoever for 12 months, and if they have a rateable value of less than £51,000, they will now get a cash grant as well. I also announced last week that we would be providing £3,000 grants to the 700,000 of our smallest businesses. To support their cash flow in these exceptional circumstances, today I can increase those cash grants to £10,000. Taken together on top of the unlimited lending capacity I have already announced, that is a package of tax cuts and grants in this financial year to directly support businesses worth more than £20 billion. That comes on top of the existing multi-billion-pound package I set out at budget, which included reimbursing small and medium-sized companies for the cost of statutory sick pay. Local authorities in England will be fully compensated for the costs of these measures, and the devolved administrations will receive at least £3.5 billion in additional funding as a result to provide support to businesses in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. I repeat again, we will do whatever it takes. Third, I will strengthen our support for peoples and individuals. At budget last week, I committed £1 billion to support the financial security of vulnerable people through a £500 million boost to the welfare system and a £500 million hardship fund for local authorities. Following discussions with industry, I can announce today that for those in difficulty due to coronavirus, mortgage lenders will now offer a 3-month mortgage holiday so that people will not have to pay a penny towards their mortgage while they get back on their feet. And in the coming days, Mr. Speaker, I will go much further to support people's financial security. In particular, I will work with trade unions and businesses to urgently develop new forms of employment support to help protect people's jobs and incomes through this period. Mr. Speaker, let no one doubt our resolve. When I said in the budget last week that we will do everything we can to keep this country and our people healthy and financially secure, I meant it. The measures I have announced today are part of a comprehensive, coordinated and coherent response to what is a serious and evolving economic situation. These are only the first steps, and I will set out the next stage of our response in the coming days. We have never faced an economic fight like this one, but we are well prepared. We will get through this, and we will do whatever it takes. And I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, John McDonnell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There was an element of déjà vu about that statement. I want to thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for providing us an earlier copy. And can I just say to him, of course we recognise the immense threat from this virus faces our country, in fact the globe, and we want to work with him to ensure that we do everything we can to protect our economy and our people. But I have to say this to him. Today, in some of our constituencies, people were being laid off. They were losing their jobs and losing their incomes, and their livelihoods are being threatened. And people are worried, and I'm just disappointed that today's package of measures didn't really appreciate the urgency and the gravity of the situation for those individuals and those families. To protect, let's establish a principle, to establish it throughout our discussions now. To protect our people, the underlying principle must be that...
So this was Rishi Sunak announcing new measures amounting to up to £330 billion, mainly talking this far just about businesses. We haven't heard anything about individuals.
So can I just range through a number of questions about issues that he failed
So we
to
have now John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, responding to Mr Sunak's statement.
There's an urgent need for statutory sick pay to be available for everybody from day one. And that means extending it to people who are on low pay, who are on part-time work, zero-hour contracts, who at the moment do not qualify. And can I ask the Chancellor, can he now consider abolishing completely the lower earnings limit with regard to statutory sick pay as called for by the CBI? And can I also say to him, can he heed the call of the TUC and other groups to lift the overall level of statutory sick pay? The TUC has proposed that this should be raised to the level of the real living wage, and I think we should support that. Other countries are providing 100% protection of wages. There's a number of other questions that remain unanswered with regard to individuals. With those workers who have been asked to self-isolate, teachers, health workers, nurses, carers, other essential public servants, will they be required to isolate, but will they be protected on full pay to ensure the essential services continue? Will the government assure people of a right to work from home? And there are other pressures felt by individuals. They relate to rents and mortgages and evictions. I really regret, and I ask the Chancellor to consider this urgently this evening, there is nothing in the statement to protect renters. Will the Chancellor, and it affects us all our constituents, will the Chancellor bring forward urgently now measures to protect renters, prevent evictions and enable rent holidays for those people unable to meet their costs? Will the Chancellor put powers in the legislation now to follow the example of some other countries as well, to freeze or suspend utility bill payments on a statutory footing because this is an emergency? And for those who have already lost their jobs, let's be clear, the level and access to universal credit is unacceptable. The Chancellor has said those receiving universal credit can receive an advance as a loan. This is pushing people into debt, some of them the poorest in our society. The CPAG has said, can we make that loan non-repayable as a grant? Can I urge him to consider that? The Chancellor has said, and I welcome it, that he's going to bring the trade unions together to look at a more sustainable package. We need to do that within days, not weeks. And we work with him to ensure that happens. And I just cite other examples. Just take the Danish example, where the government covers 75% of wages and companies cover 25%. And wages give up some holidays in exchange, that's true, but there is a job guarantee for those workers. So we want support, financial, but we want guarantees that these people, when this crisis is over, will have a job to go back to, particularly in those companies where there's been significant layoffs. And unfortunately, we are now facing significant job losses and a real sense of uncertainty for workers and businesses alike. And I have to say that uncertainty was made worse last night by statements with regard to the hospitality sector. The clarity that's needed, I don't believe the Chancellor's statement today gives that clarity. Will he make it clear to those insurance companies that this hospitality sector, the pubs, the clubs, the theatres, the festivals that are taking place, they are closing on the instruction of the government? And in that way, most of them, even if they haven't got pandemic within their insurance policies, will be covered. I welcome today's announcement of loan guarantees. I welcome it to businesses. But I noticed in the small print, and if he can clarify this, that it is interest-free for a period of 6 months only. And I'm not sure if that gives sufficient support and guarantee for the long term that many will want. I welcome the grants, but can I say to him that the response so far from a number of businesses has been the grants, the scale of the grants needs reviewing. They're too small and don't relate to the costs that people are involved in at the moment. I welcome what the government said about the business rates relief holiday. But last week, the statement seemed to exclude nurseries and childcare, and I wonder if he can just clarify that that has been remedied now, because childcare and nurseries will be desperately needed in this coming period. Can I also say that there is a bit of concern that's been expressed at the British Business Bank, being asked last week to deliver the Business Interruption Loan Scheme. As of very recently, there's little public evidence that this scheme has been established or developed. Just turning to individual sectors quickly, Mr. Speaker, on the aviation sector and other key transport sectors, I accept there is a need now for support. But I say just gently, I resent Mr. Branson urging his workers to go for 8 weeks of unpaid leave when he makes such a fortune, often by tax avoidance as well. And can I suggest that if we are going to give grants and loans and assistance to some of these sectors, we should look at whether or not we take an equity stake for the long term. And that relates to the rail sector as well. Can the Chancellor indicate whether there is any planning that if any franchises fail, they will be brought into public ownership and management? One of the sectors that has been raised with us as well, which is deeply worrying now, is the fishing sector. It's been hit hard, particularly because of its inability to export. And we've been told of the lack of insurance cover for boat mortgages. Can we look at that rapidly now to develop some form of legislative protection? And agriculture is now moving into the planting season and was already facing significant shortage of workers. It now faces even bigger challenges. Can we ask the Chancellor to reassure us that there will be support for agriculture throughout, because food supplies will be so essential during this coming period, domestic food supplies in particular? Just very briefly, Mr. Speaker, because I have to raise it because the Chancellor never mentioned it in any depth, on public services. Can I ask the Chancellor with regard to the NHS funding? And we well received the commitment that whatever the NHS needs it will get. But can we just be absolutely clear now on the scale of the allocation of funding to enable testing to take place at scale? The £5 billion figure that was set, the response fund, didn't earmark any particular funding for the NHS, let alone for testing. And clearly the public want now the reassurance that testing is to be developed, and we need the funding. Can also, on the NHS, can the government point to stronger steps that need to be taken to manufacture the essential ventilators and provide the PPE for frontline NHS workers? The reality is that also, I have to say to the Chancellor as well, if we're harvesting our resources, we do not believe we should be paying for private hospital beds at this time. In fact, many of us believe they should be requisitioned for the use of the whole community. On the overall system of caring for our population, it relies not just on the NHS, but on social care. Can we ask the Chancellor to be absolutely clear now on the scale of funding that has been directed so far for social care? There's uncertainty at the moment. And what he thinks is the best estimate of the level of funding that will be needed, given the fact that already we've inherited 120,000 vacancies and staff numbers may well dwindle because of the impact of the virus. And I have to say as well, we've seen evidence in recent years of some care companies facing threats to their financial viability. What plans has the government developed to intervene, if necessary, in this sector? Can I also say there's pressure on family carers who are relied upon to support our social care system, and we need proposals to support them financially too. Can I say briefly, coming to a conclusion, Mr. Secretary, can I say that one area of change that has been mooted is in relation to the possible closure of our schools. It's crucial that childcare support is provided in the event of any closures occurring. And I have to say also, and I say to the Chancellor, we'll work with him on this and we'll work with local authorities, but it is crucial that those children that are dependent on free school dinners receive support if the schools are closed. We cannot allow them to go hungry. Staff of schools may be off for long periods and we need to ensure their incomes are guaranteed, and we'd like that assurance too. Can I say as well that pupils or students are being advised to study from home, and most will require access to high-speed broadband. Can we ask him what will be done to ensure access to broadband for students? And can I suggest to him that it could be free? We all rely in our communities along the voluntary sector as well, and it is being hit hard because of the temporary downturn in donations and also staffing levels. So can I ask him what consideration has been given for grants to ensure that the voluntary sector can continue to play its important functions. Can I say finally, in terms of the Barnett consequentials, we need more clarity. Very quickly, there is uncertainty about the scale of support that will be given to the devolved countries and regions.
Hello?
Can I finally say, with regard to the international interventions, in 2007-2008, whatever people thought about Gordon Brown's individual policies, actually he showed international leadership to tackle that crisis. I've expressed previously my disappointment that the government didn't act sooner in bringing countries together. Can I urge him now to follow up the teleconference with the G7 on Monday with the engagement through the G20, the World Bank, the WHO and UN, and bring forward now a global plan with his colleagues to ensure that we can give not just assurance to the markets, but to assurance for those, particularly in the global south, who may well be hit hardest by this virus. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Exchequer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Right Honourable Member for the constructive attitude in which he approaches some of these issues, and very much welcome his desire to work with me to try and solve some of these pressing issues that face our nation. Can I try and answer as many of the specific questions that he asked?
Where to start? I mean,
with
it's
financial security for our most vulnerable people.
That it is quite
I wholeheartedly agree that this is a priority and should be a priority, which is why
that he's offering. He's looking at about 330 billion, which is about 15% of the national GDP. But we've only heard about businesses. He has talked about a comprehensive, coordinated and coherent approach, and he has called for courage. He said this is a time for courage. This is, again, let's remind everyone, we haven't heard anything about supporting individuals. This is about supporting jobs, incomes in businesses, he said, but not still not on an individual basis. Details, this is mostly about accessibility to loans, so there will be some grants available for smaller businesses, but mostly this is about accessibility to loans and business rate relief for businesses. I understand there will be 100% rate relief for any business with a rateable value of 51,000 a year. So in specific sectors, as the entertainment, retail and hospitality sector, again, we're seeing very, very attractive terms. They are proposing the abolition of, I believe, I was just trying to make notes as he was talking, so business rate relief and also the accessibility to loans, smaller loans, up to £25,000 for middle-sized businesses, and then for the very small businesses, I believe it was up to about £3,000 to cover costs. Now, we've heard, and these will be grants, so we're talking about two things here. We're talking about accessibility to loans, which will come obviously with terms. They will come with interest, and some level of interest rate attached to it. And then we're talking about grants for smaller businesses. Now, Chris, what you make of this? I mean, obviously, this doesn't quite go far enough.
No, it's a pebble in the ocean. I mean, literally, John McDonnell picked holes in everything that Richie Sunak was offering, with the exception, obviously, of the NHS. There's a general consensus that they are, quite happy with the idea of what the NHS requires it will get. But specifically, he was asking for precise increments, to do with social care, to do with, various departments, obviously research as well as testing. So
we don't have any details.
Don't have any details.
On the specifics of NHS support.
When Richie Sunak was drawing this up, he's obviously not, quite thought it through. I was particularly taken. I loved that John McDonnell just firmly and fairly put down and said, let's not be giving loans to Richard Branson.
Because we know that Richard has now written to the government requesting a facility of up to about 8 billion, I believe, to save the business, to save the aviation business, which is a vital part of the economy. But we have to take into account there in the aviation business equities, assets.
Well, not only that, it's the fact that it's solely for his company. It's not for the aviation business.
It is not for the aviation industry.
It's just for
himself. Okay, right. Okay, so apologies. Yeah, I thought he was trying to save the world, but Richard Branson wasn't trying to save the world yesterday. No, that was my mistake. So we're talking mainly about businesses. We have had some reassurances. He has been very generic about saying the NHS will get whatever they need. But today there's been an absolute deluge of testimony from doctors and nurses working over the last couple of weeks. Some of them, as usual, overworked, exhausted, and describing the minutiae of being within their A&E departments, looking after coronavirus victims. And let us not forget that these doctors are not solely dealing with coronavirus at the moment. People are still getting heart attacks. People are still breaking their hips. There's still all sorts of emergencies that they have to deal with. So the coronavirus is on top. The one thing that I thought was interesting and actually probably needs to be dealt with is the clothing, protective clothing. I understand.
PPE.
The PPE, I understand only 1/3 of A&E as a general figure. Some areas may be slightly better, have access to it, and some nurses this morning were tweeting and putting posts on Facebook about we're having to protect our mouths with paper masks and things like that. So this is not really at the moment doing what it needs to be doing, and also the testing. I mean, the World Health Organization have again come forward with more prompting and requests for tests. And we're not quite doing this.
There was one of these morning discussion programs earlier on, and there was actually a staff nurse there, and she was holding up what they have got to use
which
for
would
PPE.
go nowhere near.
And it's a flimsy apron. It's a flimsy mask, and not even a pair of gloves.
And considering the amount of virus that potentially any one of them would be exposed to, it would have to be serious protection if we're going to talk.
You are looking at being treating this on a serious level.
Absolutely.
Then all our health workers firstly should be checked to make sure that they don't have the virus,
which is not at the moment.
Right. And then once they've got the all clear, then you issue them with hazmats.
That's right, exactly.
It's the full hazmat kit. And you just can't take any chances.
Absolutely not.
They are trying to, the way that I see it is the fact that they're trying to skimp and save money.
So we're standing by for Ian Blackford at the moment. So Ian...
And a great weight lies upon the shoulders of my right honourable friend.
Sorry, no, we're not quite there yet. We will bring you Ian Blackford as soon as we've got him. Shall we go very quickly to what was promised to the devolved administrations? Because I think our viewers would be very interested in that. Now, he was quite specific. He said £3.5 billion of additional funding is going to the devolved administrations. He didn't quite tell us the minutiae of that, so we don't know what's coming to Scotland, what's going to Northern Ireland, what's going to Wales. But just judging on a very broad level, out of a 330 billion package, this is quite a small figure.
Paltry.
It is a little bit, I think, and we don't know exactly again what the terms of this extra funding will be.
I think you roughly worked it out to equate to about
100th, I think, of what is So we're a little bit more than 100th of the population, Mr. Sunak. So can you please reconsider? He won't be doing that tonight. But in terms of what Kate Forbes has announced, however, which was reassuring, because there are a lot of small businesses in Scotland. A lot of people own small or medium-sized businesses. Oh, have we got Ian Blackford?
Support, and I can tell him that we are working on those proposals urgently and plan to hopefully...
We're still on Rishi's responses to previous speakers. So just share your thoughts, Christopher, maybe on what has already been promised in Scotland and what we're likely to be seeing come through over the next week, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Well, I think, again, in many ways Scotland is playing catch-up.
He's announced
we have got Ian Blackford. We'll come back to you in a minute.
Evening. I also want to put on record my thanks to health staff, to volunteers and to everybody who's working at the forefront of this crisis. I also want to mark my sadness at the second death that has been recorded in Scotland today. Mr. Speaker, we want to work across the economy and across society because this is about people's lives here, and the Chancellor is right to say that there should be nothing spared when we come to this. Can the Chancellor tell me, first of all, what the Barnett consequentials precisely will be from today's announcements? Because he says that the Scottish Government knew in advance, and I do not want to make this party political, and I don't make this point to be party political, but my understanding is the Scottish Government only got notified by letter at 5:30 p.m. yesterday of the previous set of Barnett consequentials from last week's budget. And I hear members saying that has been the same for Wales. The Scottish Government wants to act, and they want to act swiftly, and they must not be behind the curve of what England is doing. And the Chancellor must pick up the phone to Kate Forbes, the Scottish Cabinet Finance Secretary, to let her know exactly what is coming so that she can make the action for Scotland's businesses and individuals right across the country. The Chancellor mentioned that loans will be in attractive terms. Can he tell us more about the details of those loans? Because businesses will be nervous about taking on more debt at this time. And interest fee over 6 months is perhaps not good enough for businesses who are struggling at the moment and questioning their very future. Flexibility for the Chancellor on next steps is welcome again, but we would expect to see those come before the House if that is at all possible. On airlines, will the Chancellor take a stake in these airlines in order to guarantee that money for the future? And will he make sure that in any intervention to airlines that staff are protected first? And that would include support staff within airports and the supply chain as well, not just airline staff directly, because all of them are worried about their jobs. Cash transfers for small businesses are very welcome, but I would suggest gently that the £3,000 that was announced last week really wasn't enough, and announcing £10,000 today really goes to show how short that was. The hospitality sector in particular needs urgent clarity about what is going to happen for events, for pubs, right across the sector. And the government needs to be absolutely clear that if people are to stay away from pubs need to know that, and they need to have the backing of the government if those pubs are to close. And all right across the hospitality sector, including hotels and including lots of small businesses and that supply chain as well. The ABI have suggested, Mr. Speaker, that many businesses will not have a policy that covers pandemic. So will the UK Government stand as an insurer of last resort, as Professor Sir Charles Bean suggested at the Treasury Select Committee today, when he said big early action is better than half-hearted action that's late? And I would urge the Chancellor to think on that. I would also ask him that if insurers are being asked to pay out on all of these policies, can the insurers themselves cope? And will the government stand behind the insurers if that needs to be the case? I want to ask the Chancellor what protection is being given to pregnant women around maternity entitlement, because lots of women have been asked to take their maternity leave early, which will then affect how long they can stay off at the end of that, and they need to know that the government will back them on that as well, and they will not lose out on that maternity leave due to the coronavirus. The Chancellor has made no mention of private renters within his remarks, and particularly those young people who are more likely as well to be in insecure employment. If the Chancellor is going to give a break to those paying mortgages, lots of those will be buy-to-rent mortgages, where people will be renting accommodation, and if the mortgage holders are getting a break, that must be guaranteed for the renters as well. That must be passed on, and passed on quickly. And there are people who are losing their tenancies around the country just now, if you look at Twitter, and they don't know about whether they can get into a new tenancy. In the US, there has been $1,000 to go to Americans. In Italy, €500 to the self-employed. Will he consider such direct schemes to individuals who may be struggling to cope? Will he also look at the situation for asylum seekers and those with no recourse to public funds who cannot claim benefits? Because those people are particularly vulnerable just now. The services and the food banks and the voluntary action that they rely on will disappear, and those people need to have direct payments as well if they are to live through this crisis.
I note that France is going to direct payment of bills. Will the Chancellor look at that as a measure? Because that will just stop money being taken out of people's pockets rather than putting money into people's pockets as a different mechanism. Is that something that he's spoken to the energy companies about? To turn to the issue of the vulnerability of people in the economy just now, the Fraser of Allender Institute has said that young people under 25, only 1 in 4 under 25s have enough savings to cover 1 month of income. Under 25s are incredibly vulnerable, and will you look at specific measures to tackle the issues for young people? Households at the bottom end of the income decile, only 42% at the bottom income decile have enough savings to cover a month. People are not going to manage through this crisis on the basis of the money they have in the bank at the moment, because a lot of people have no money in the bank. The Chancellor needs to consider how he's going to deal with this and make sure that those people can put food in the table, and particularly for families. Because if the schools do close and people can't work, there is no money coming into those households, and that Chancellor needs to think how those families will put food on the table for those children during this extended period. A lot has been made about statutory sick pay, and I would agree with everybody who has said statutory sick pay is woefully inadequate to deal with the crisis that we face. And the Government has suggested that universal credit is what people should apply for, but they seem to forget that universal credit is far less generous even than statutory sick pay for many people. So will he increase urgently the amount of money that people can get through the universal credit system? Will he upgrade that at the moment and uprate that so that people can get enough money to survive through this crisis? Will he look at extending the period for universal credit advances, or ideally get rid of those advances and pay directly straight away? And will he make sure that the DWP look carefully at the implications of people claiming universal credit for their entitlement to legacy benefits? Because people may lose out on their legacy benefits if they jump into universal credit just now, and will they protect that for all claimants so that they don't lose out in the long term? Mr Speaker, this is a crisis. I welcome all action that the UK Government is going to take on this, but the questions this afternoon will be many. There will be legion, and people will have so many questions in the days ahead. So I ask the Government to listen and to react as quickly as they can to all the questions that honourable colleagues will raise this evening and in the weeks and months ahead.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I thank the honourable member for her comments, and I can reassure her I am listening, and indeed I welcome all the suggestions that she's made, and indeed all honourable members will make. We are listening attentively, both honourable members and to businesses and others, to make sure that we can provide the support that is required. To answer the specific questions, the Barnett consequentials resulting from today's package will be about £3.5 billion. My honourable friend, the Chief Secretary, will be speaking to the Scottish Finance Minister, I believe tomorrow, to explain in more detail how this will work. And I would say that what we did earlier this week is to release the Barnett consequentials to devolved authorities before that money has been drawn down in England, as would be typical, to provide advance on the Barnett consequentials to all devolved authorities in recognition of the circumstances that everyone is grappling with, so that they can plan appropriately, and I hope that that would be welcomed. Obviously, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment on the specifics of any intervention in any particular company, whether it's airlines or anything else, but I agree with her that in general we are interested in protecting people's jobs. And when I stand here and talk about supporting businesses, I'm keen to support businesses because that's the best way to protect jobs, and that ultimately is the best way to help people. She asked about the cash grants, Mr Speaker. What I would say in terms of thinking about the scale of these grants and how significant they might be, for let's take the £10,000 grant available for anyone currently in receipt of small business rate relief, the typical rateable value on one of those properties would be about £7,000 approximately. That's a good proxy for a year's worth of rent. A £10,000 cash grant is therefore reasonably significant in covering what is probably the biggest fixed cost of a business, and then looked on an income level as well as what an average income might be of one of those smaller businesses. Again, it will be significant. And she talked, of course, about pubs and the leisure sector sector. In that sector, not only will there be a business rates holiday for the next 12 months for all businesses in that sector, regardless of their rateable value, there will be also a £25,000 cash grant for businesses up to £51,000. She asked about insurance. What I would say to her, I think the statement today is welcome on insurance. In terms of retrospectively changing insurance policies, that is rightly something that she identified would cause solvency issues, most likely with insurance companies, so is not perhaps the most appropriate course of action, which is why we have several other measures of support directly to business in these circumstances, and she will probably be aware that very few businesses actually have the requisite insurance in any case. So although the steps today are welcome, it is important we think more broadly about direct support. I welcome her question on maternity pay, which I will go away and talk to my right honourable friend, the Work and Pension Secretary, about and reflect on that. With regard to renters, again, my earlier answer stands. My right honourable friend, the Housing Secretary, will shortly be making announcement about further measures to protect renters. And in closing, she talked about other countries and fiscal responses and individual measures. Every country is doing this slightly differently, but broadly are trying to do the same things through different means. I think the best way to judge us is to judge this total scale of our fiscal response, and on that metric, as a percentage of GDP benchmarked to almost all developed countries, we have what is to date one of the most comprehensive and significant packages of scale, which underlies our commitment, as I said, to do what it takes to get the country through this.
David Davis.
So that was Rishi Sunak's responses to Alison Thulis's, the points that she raised in regards to some actually very, very important points in regards to protecting, in specific, the business issues that he raised in regards to protecting businesses, in regards to protecting smaller businesses, in regards to protecting pubs in the entertainment industry, in regards to work contracts, in regards to pregnant women and maternity leaves, in regards to she also raised a very, very important point about private renters and people on small incomes and people on what is known as zero-hour contracts, which is effectively an unsecured type of work. Now, we have heard Rishi Sunak respond to the points. Generally, I think, and judges by what Katie Forbes has been tweeting and saying today, it is quite welcome. It's a welcome. It's a large package. It's not a bad start, but there are a lot of issues that still need to be consolidated within what he said. Yeah.
There definitely is, and again, as laudable as how generous that they are, it's still not enough. You won't be surprised to hear a socialist say that it's just not enough. But there's still ambiguity around certain areas. And I noticed that he said roughly 3.5 billion.
Yes.
But he wouldn't commit to that.
Yes. So we've had the response from Alison Thulis, who raised the Barnett consequentials that we weren't quite sure at the moment, and he said that he did release those yesterday, and that was the ones from the budget last year, obviously. Yeah. Last week. So we are yet to see what would be the consequentials at present, obviously.
Yeah, because obviously those consequences will need to be changed because of the additional 3.5.
Absolutely.
And he did.
But the 3.5, I understand, is not coming to Scotland. He's talking about devolved administrations.
Administrations, yeah. So, but the other thing, again, and again, I go back to the fact that it is very ambiguous.
Ambiguous, yeah.
Yeah, because, they are very woolly. They're not hard, fast, concrete. This is what we're going to do.
Yes.
You will get this.
Yep.
You will get it by this date.
The devil will be in the detail.
When Alison was asking about private renters, he batted that question away by saying the housing minister
tomorrow
will tell
we
you
will
something,
talk about this.
And in some ways, I never thought that I'd get to see the UK government acting like the Italians.
Yes.
You know, where it's
actually,
where it's,
you know,
where
I
it's-
don't know whether the virus is maybe having some effect on them, some magical effect on them.
Well, yeah,
at the moment.
do you know what I mean?
But,
Because they seem very relaxed,
yeah.
and everything seems like mañana, sempre mañana.
We'll talk about it, and maybe let us be hopeful. As he said, this is not a party political concern, and we all pray and hope that this is going to end well. That we're all going to come out the other end of this, hopefully better. But are we ready to the? All right.
Have we got more VT?
Sorry, I'm a little bit. So this is my very first broadcast, so you have to bear with me. Right, okay, yes. So we are going to, so we have the coronavirus update for you now. I understand that the death toll for the UK, I've just been told, now stands at 60 out of a total of just over 195,000 detected cases. But back to Scotland, as of 2 p.m. today in Scotland, there has been a total of 5,246 Scottish tests. They've been concluded, and of these, 5,051 tests were confirmed negative. 195 tests were positive. Today, a second patient in Scotland has sadly died from complications caused by the coronavirus COVID-19 infection. Chief Medical Officer Catherine Calderwood said, "I'm very saddened to report that an elderly patient with underlying health conditions who has tested positive for coronavirus has died. They were being treated by the NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board. I offer my deepest condolences to their friends and family at this difficult time. No further information will be available to protect patient confidentiality." The UK figures, including Scotland, report that 50,442 people have been tested, of which 48,492 cases were confirmed negative and 1,950 were confirmed as positive. That is sadly an increase of 56 in total. That is the number of deaths, yes. Yeah. So, which now stands obviously at 60. Just the two deaths in Scotland. The Ministerial, let's go now to a video. It's his Ministerial statement on the situation.
We'll shortly hand over to the Health Secretary, and following her statement, the whole Cabinet is available for questions. First, though, with your permission, I do want to make a brief statement. Scotland today, like countries across the world, faces an unprecedented challenge. Addressing it will involve the biggest peacetime mission our nation has undertaken in our lifetimes. The scientific advice that all four governments in the UK received yesterday shows that we are now on the cusp of a rapid escalation in the spread of COVID-19. That means that we must take far more stringent steps to suppress as far as we can the spread of the virus, protect and scale up the capacity of the NHS as best we can, and by doing these things, save lives. The steps we recommended yesterday represent a major change for all of us, a change from life as we know it, but they are essential to give us the best chance of achieving those aims. Let me summarise the three new recommendations that applied to Scotland as of yesterday. We had already made clear that if someone has symptoms of COVID-19, a persistent cough or a fever, they should isolate themselves for 7 days. That means, as far as possible, they should not leave the house and reduce contact with other people in the house as much as possible. In addition, and this was a new element in yesterday's advice, anyone else in a household where someone has symptoms should isolate for 14 days. That covers the 7 days for which the first person is infectious and a further 7 days to see if they or anyone else gets the virus. These measures are essential to reduce the chance of spreading the virus to others. The second measure, which applies to everyone, not just to people with symptoms, is that we should minimise social contact as much as possible. This is vital to reduce the risk for all of us of getting infected, or if we do, of passing it on to others, especially to those who are most vulnerable. People should, as far as possible, avoid crowded areas and gatherings. That includes bars, restaurants and cinemas. We also want people to use public transport as little as possible and to work from home if you can. This advice is important for everyone, but it applies especially strongly to three groups. Firstly, people who are over 70. Second, people with underlying health conditions for which they get the flu vaccine. And third, women who are pregnant. We are strongly advising them to stay at home as much as possible and to significantly reduce unnecessary social contact. We are not so far proposing the blanket closure of schools. At present, our judgment is that the negative consequences of this for the overall well-being of children and in terms of the impact on the health service workforce, for example, outweigh the benefits. But I do want to assure the public that this is under daily review and the protection of children will always be our priority. The third and final step is to shield the most vulnerable, by which I mean specifically people with compromised immune systems. GPs and other healthcare professionals will be contacting these patients to ensure that they are fully supported. As well as trying to reduce the peak of the virus, we are increasing the capacity of our health service. The Cabinet Secretary will speak in detail about that in a few moments. But I want to restate my heartfelt thanks to everyone who works in our health and social care services. They are dealing with pressures which are already great and which will soon become immense. We will do everything possible to support them. I am also acutely aware of how serious the impact of yesterday's recommendations will be for businesses and for households. The actions we require to take to mitigate a health emergency will for many businesses and individuals cause an economic emergency. We have already announced some support for business and we are urgently considering what more we can do. We're also speaking to the UK Government about what more they will do for business and we will set out further actions as soon as possible. We will also be making more information available in coming days on support for those individuals in financial difficulty. There is, of course, a fundamental principle here which in many ways goes to the heart of the contract between government and people. We as a government are asking people to take unprecedented actions and I recognise that the response from government must also be unprecedented. Presiding Officer, the next weeks and possibly months will be immensely difficult. I know that for everyone this is a deeply anxious time. People want to do the right thing to protect their own health and they also want to do the right thing for their loved ones and for their wider community. The advice we issued yesterday is intended to help all of us do that. The steps we are recommending, isolating yourself if you or people you live with show symptoms, minimising social contact, washing hands for 20 seconds, not touching your face, all of these things really matter. By following them, we will all be helping to save lives. We face a shared national challenge and we will need a collective national endeavour to meet it. We all have a part to play. We must all show solidarity, compassion and kindness for each other, not simply in person, but in our phone calls and text messages, our social media presence, even our waves across the street to each other, and also, of course, in our offers to help where we can. And by doing that, by looking after ourselves, our loved ones and our communities, we can and we will get through this. So I want to end, Presiding Officer, by thanking everyone across our country in advance for their help and support in the months ahead in doing just that.
Thank you, First Minister. And can I call on the Cabinet Secretary for Health, Jean Freeman.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, before I start, can I take this opportunity to apologise my colleagues, the party spokespeople on health, for the very late arrival of this statement. I'm sure they understand how we are working at pace, but that is not normal practice, and I am sorry they've not had any sufficient time in detail to consider it. I am, of course, very happy to answer questions either today or at a future occasion for them. Presiding Officer, our nation faces a challenge to our way of life, to public health, in a manner that has never been seen before in our lifetimes. The scale of the challenge is, as the First Minister has said, quite simply, without precedent. With the First Minister, I cannot express how grateful I am to the women and men of our health service, our care services and our emergency services for all the work they have done so far in addressing this challenge and for the work they are prepared to do in the weeks ahead. They truly are the best of us, and I know the whole Chamber will want to join me in recognising them as we confront the impact of COVID-19 on Scotland. They are our front line and they face a heroic and difficult task, but we can all play our part to help them. As of 9 a.m. this morning, there have been 195 positive cases recorded in Scotland, but we know the true figure of infections will be substantially higher. I also regretfully advise the Chamber that there have now, to date, been 2 reported deaths of patients who have tested positive for COVID-19 in Scotland. Our thoughts are with their families and their loved ones at what is a painful time for them. As the First Minister has just set out, we are asking our society to take some truly unprecedented steps to suppress the spread of this infection and minimise its impact. Forgive me. Okay, thank you. Our goal is simple: to protect and save lives, and we need everyone's help to achieve this. I know we've asked a lot of the people of Scotland, but in the weeks and months to come, we may have to ask for far more. To respond to COVID-19 requires a swift and radical change in the way our NHS does its work. It is nothing short of the most rapid reconfiguration of our health service in its 71-year history. That's why today, under Section 1 and Section 78 of the National Health Service Scotland Act 1978, I am formally placing our National Health Service on an emergency footing for at least the next 3 months. I am giving my instructions to NHS Scotland and the individual health boards to do all that is necessary to be ready to face a substantial and sustained increase in the cases of COVID-19. Should I require to lay new regulations to enable our boards to achieve this, I will bring them before this Parliament swiftly. Our first goal is to double the ICU capacity in Scotland. Boards are working towards this by providing the necessary training for staff and by repurposing facilities. Our contingency planning for the supply of oxygen, both in hospital and in the community, is in place, and we have ordered a further 450 new standard concentrators for the use in the community, as well as further contingency, which can be called on if necessary. Our current bed capacity in NHS Scotland is approximately 13,000. Our boards are taking all necessary steps to increase this by at least a further 3,000. To achieve this, our normal programme of non-urgent elective operations will be suspended. I want to be very clear though, vital cancer treatments, emergency, maternity and urgent care will continue. NHS boards are aware that they must take a structured approach around postponing of non-urgent elective procedures with a view that patients will remain on the waiting list until it is clinically appropriate to have their procedure undertaken. All boards are developing local mobilisation plans to achieve this. Additionally, we have established a National Cancer Treatment Response Group which will provide ongoing advice and support around cancer treatments. The impact of COVID-19 on cancer patients has been a priority in all of our planning, and we will ensure that all appropriate measures are undertaken in the present situation to protect those living with cancer. We are also working closely with COSLA and the Health and Social Care Partnerships and Chief Officers to see a rapid reduction in delayed discharges. The goal I have set is a reduction of at least 400 by the end of this month. We are also engaged with the independent healthcare sector in Scotland, which is relatively small, to ensure that we can utilise them to maximum available bed capacity to help the NHS. All of these steps will necessitate some redeployment of staff within our health service. We have issued guidance to health boards and staff on planning and redeployment. We will keep these under review regularly with updates and advice as the situation evolves. We are also seeking support to backfill, including by working with regulators to enable returners to the healthcare of professionals and by looking to deploy senior students in both nursing, allied health professions and medicine into settings appropriate to their skills. In addition, NHS Education for Scotland will be providing a range of induction and training materials on COVID-19 to meet the needs of employers, and these can be accessed via the NHS website Tourist Learn, which goes live today. As we work to suppress this infection, we will continue a strong testing regime that will ensure key workers, such as frontline NHS staff, will be tested so that they do not self-isolate unnecessarily. As the First Minister said earlier this week, we are scaling up of COVID-19 surveillance testing, which will give us a more accurate picture of how the infection is spreading in certain areas. This will help direct where we can best place resources to try and save lives. The surveillance will be increased fivefold to give an accurate overview of an area with a population of around 1.2 million. Monitoring will also continue through our laboratories and will be targeted on the following further groups: admissions to hospital, admissions to intensive care, and community testing dependent on circumstances, for example, specific situations such as a nursing home outbreak. The safety and well-being of our hard-working NHS staff is a huge priority, and I expect all boards to ensure that staff dealing with COVID-19 cases have the appropriate training and personal protective equipment to ensure their safety. It is not just, though, in acute setting that support is required. Health Protection Scotland COVID-19 guidance on PPE for primary care states that for all consultations for acute respiratory infection or influenza-like illness, GPs need to wear face masks, aprons, gloves and eye protection. Last week, we issued further supplies of all of these items to health boards for onward distribution to GP practices in Scotland. Should there be practices that require further equipment that is in keeping with the guidance, we will work to ensure it is swiftly delivered by boards, and I have asked boards to ensure this distribution by the 20th of March. In order to cope with rapid increase in numbers of people presenting with respiratory symptoms in this current phase of infection, a new COVID-19 community pathway model is being implemented, with patients being asked to contact via NHS 24 on the 111 number rather than through their GPs. We are also ready to support local authorities and care providers with supply issues relating to PPE for social care sector in order to safeguard vulnerable people in our communities. Extensive work is already underway with our social care partners to put in place arrangements to increase the social care workforce capacity. One group that could be profoundly hurt by a COVID-19 infection is people who are immunosuppressed. If you are in this category, next week the NHS will directly contact you and advise you of the stringent measures you need to take to keep yourself and others safe. NHS Scotland will make those contacts directly next week and work closely with other social services to ensure that support is provided. For those in long-term care facilities who are often frail with complex needs, HPS has published specific guidance for infection prevention and control in social or community care and residential settings. In addition, the Chief Medical Officer has published specific advice about visitors and admissions to care homes. We are discussing with Scottish Care and COSLA what more can be done to ensure the overall well-being of residents in long-term care homes. And we are engaging with third sector partners who have contact with and already support those who are clinically vulnerable to ensure people receive the right advice on what precautions to take, and that those supporting them also have the best information available on how to keep people safe. Presiding Officer, in years to come, when people look back, there will be a time before this infection outbreak and a time after. It is a watershed moment in our nation, in our world, and most certainly in our NHS. We are doing and will continue to do everything we can to protect and save lives. But this is going to take everyone. We all have a responsibility and we need everyone's help. Thank you.
So this was Jane Freeman, the Scottish Health Secretary there, and talking after Nicola Sturgeon, who did say repeatedly that we are having to take unprecedented measures as we are living in unprecedented times. Something worth remembering. And on to the next item, which is slightly more upbeat, let's say upbeat, maybe actually bizarre. SNP MP Carol Monaghan has written to the CEOs of major supermarkets across the UK, urging them to prioritise some home delivery slots for elderly and vulnerable people as new measures are introduced to tackle the coronavirus. In a letter to retailers, the MP for Glasgow North West also called on I do apologise. In a letter to retailers, the MP for Glasgow North West also called on supermarkets to operate a system similar to Ireland, whereby only elderly people can access the stores at certain times. Commenting, Carol Monaghan MP said, UK retailers have been proactive in their response to the coronavirus crisis, and the steps taken, including reminding customers to be considerate and limiting sales of certain high-demand products, have been welcome. I have been contacted by a number of constituents who are concerned about supplies of food and other essential items available for the elderly and vulnerable in our community. That is why I have written to the CEOs of major supermarkets across the UK to ask that some home delivery slots are prioritised for elderly and vulnerable people. I have also asked that retailers consider introducing a system as seen in some supermarkets in Ireland, where there are specific slots from 8 to 9 a.m. for elderly customers only. Such measures would go a long way in addressing some serious concerns raised about protecting people in our society, while people in their local communities should, if they are able to, continue to assist elderly and vulnerable neighbours. What has your experience been so far? Have you run out of blue paper?
Shopping? No, I haven't. Because
let me just explain. I mean, this was we said bizarre. This is actually, again, we are finding ourselves in unprecedented times.
Yeah.
This is the panic buying here, and the result of it, which leaves a lot of vulnerable groups, people in fragile situations, people with a lot of kids, the elderly, without the very essentials, i.e. toilet paper.
Yeah. But, you know, coronavirus doesn't give you the runs.
No,
right?
no.
So therefore you don't need to go out and buy oodles of toilet paper, okay? Secondly, the people who are stocking up on pasta, rice, tuna, eggs, it's bizarre. It really is bizarre.
It is. It's not.
And it's indicative of the society that we live in these days.
I was just thinking this morning, Chris, about, people were looking forward, especially a lot of the, large segments of the English population were looking forward to the Blitz spirit. They're not coping. They're not coping very well. I mean, this is not even what it would be like, God forbid, and we don't want to taste it. But this isn't working, is it? Blitz spirit is not working.
I honestly, I shudder when you've mentioned that Blitz spirit, the bulldog,
the
Britain will stand and and will dig for victory routine. Absolute bollocks. It really is. It really is. I lose it completely when I hear all that. You've even got, in these current times, you've got Jacob Rees-Mogg on Twitter, and he's, telling everybody to sing God Save the Queen as he put a picture up of her sitting in a bloody car that nobody can afford.
Yes.
No.
It just shows you,
We are looking at.
She's the Queen is, as we all know, has now been taken to Windsor Castle to protect herself and Prince Philip from the
just down
coronavirus.
The road from where we used to live.
Yeah, well, exactly, absolutely. We've just discovered that we were neighbours in the Cobham area of Surrey. So there's news for you.
A socialist living in Surrey.
There you go. Footballer land, my God. So she is protected, and so are here the students of Eton College. Eton College is now closed for what they describe as a short holiday. that's not still the case with our children at school, but I think we're expecting action on that shortly. But obviously, this is also to encourage everyone at home, please do not stockpile. There are very vulnerable groups out there. There are elderly people living on their own. There are people with condition, and it's a selfish thing to do. And discourage it. Make sure you don't do it. We won't be needing toilet paper, as Chris said. This is not one of the symptoms of the coronavirus. And pasta, things like that. There will be sufficient for all. So think before. At the moment, that you can't buy it because the shelves are empty. But hopefully, when they do restock, think before you buy. Now, major events have now been cancelled. The Grand National has been cancelled. We're here on April the 4th. And the Royal Highland Show at Ingliston in June has also been cancelled. Dominic Raab advises the UK public to avoid all non-essential travel. He has advised the British public to avoid travelling anywhere in the world for at least 30 days as the government steps up the battle against the COVID-19. Raab said the dramatic decision followed on from the Prime Minister's announcement on Monday that all members of the public should avoid non-essential social contact. He said the Foreign Office was responding to fast-changing international circumstances, including the growing number of countries that have closed their borders. The speed and the range of those measures across other countries is unprecedented, he said. UK retailers abroad now face widespread international border restrictions and lockdowns in various countries. The FCO will always consider the safety and the security of British nationals, so with immediate effect today, I have taken the decision to advise British nationals against non-essential travel globally for an initial period of 30 days and, of course, subject to ongoing review. We want to reduce the risk of leaving vulnerable British travellers stranded overseas, he said, saying that anyone deciding to travel would have to take responsibility for any consequences should they be unable to return home. Raab also stressed that it was unrealistic to expect the government to offer emergency repatriation for many tourists. No one should be under any illusions. It is costly, it is expensive to coordinate, he said. The Foreign Secretary said international haulage and freight would not be included in the advice because of the importance of maintaining supply chains for goods. We do regard this kind of travel as essential, and we will work with industry to issue detailed advice which maintains the flow of goods whilst protecting the well-being of staff who are working on those routes, he said. The significant escalation in the government's advice followed Monday's statement by Boris Johnson, who conceded it was the most draconian set of measures seen in peacetime. Responding to Raab, the Shadow Foreign Secretary highlighted the cases of individual travellers stranded abroad without advice from the government or their travel company. Dominic Raab advising people on geography. I have an issue with that. He is not the man to do that. Dover is by the sea, Dominic. This comes from me. Now, what do you make of this?
Well, not only is he trying to advise on geography, but he's also trying to advise on aviation, which should be, the sole baby of the Transport Minister.
Absolutely.
And from my experience in the aviation industry, there are thousands of aircraft that are parked up in Britain at this moment in time. It is not out with the realms of possibility for the UK government to, not even charter one, but to actually sort of just say to one of the companies, you operate a plane and you fly it over and you bring people back.
He's claiming
we order them to go to the airport, and if they don't want to get on it, that's it. End of.
Of course.
So it's not out with the realms of possibility to do that. There are staff lying idle at this moment in time.
There are, yes.
And they could definitely facilitate this. And it could be done within a matter of weeks.
But obviously, they are washing their hands of it.
Because in that piece that you just read out there, is that he said it's too costly. So again, that's the Tories thinking about money all the time. Money over people's health.
Yes, it is, and sadly, some of the delays that we're seeing across the response to this virus is also related to economic concerns. Emily Thornberry said the response to coronavirus represented a chronic failure of global leadership and coordination in which our own government has sadly been one of the parties. A string of other MPs also confronted Raab with details of their constituents stuck overseas. Former Foreign Office Minister Heather Wheeler pointed to a case involving a British tourist in Kiev where she said the embassy was closed. Unfortunately, we're hearing about certain embassies being shut. In it's £1.80 a minute to phone the Foreign Office helpline, and it's a 58-minute delay. Labour MP Caroline Harris highlighted the case of a British couple stranded in Cyprus. Their flights are cancelled, the hotel room needs vacating, their insurance is about to expire, and the insurance company is only offering to pay retrospective costs when they return to the UK. The Foreign Secretary replied that there was a groundswell of UK nationals. In a particular occasion, what we're trying to do is ensure the reasons those flights aren't running in and out, and that needs addressed. Raab was speaking after a cabinet meeting at which Johnston told his top team they were engaged in a war against a disease which we have to win, according to an official readout. Ministers agreed the creation of 4 new committees to coordinate the government's response to the crisis. They will cover healthcare, the public sector, chaired by the Cabinet Office Minister Michael Gove, economic and business and international, with many industries from pubs to airlines clamouring for support as demand plunges. The Chancellor Rishi Sunak reminded his colleagues of the measures already taken in the budget to support firms. And we have talked about the grants of up to £50,000 for small businesses and reimbursements and all the other details that he has talked about, and we've seen the responses of Alison Thewlis as well. Trade talks, EU trade talks will not take place as planned due to coronavirus. Trade talks between Britain and the European Union will not take place as scheduled on Wednesday because of the coronavirus outbreak, but London expects to share its draft version of the agreement with Brussels in the near future, a British government spokeswoman said. Negotiating teams were due to hold a second round of talks on agreeing a future relationship after Britain left the EU in January. But social distancing measures prompted by the rapid spread of the virus has made face-to-face talk impossible. In light of the latest guidance on coronavirus, we will not formally be convening negotiating work strands tomorrow in the way we did in the previous round. The government spokeswoman said in a statement, we expect to share a draft FTA, a free trade agreement, alongside the draft legal text of a number of the standalone agreements in the near future, still as planned, she said, adding that both sides were fully committed to the talks and were looking at alternative ways to keep them going. Okay, so they used to go to Brussels with not much material in the folders. Now they don't even have to go.
Well, at some point in time, they didn't actually. There was one minister turned up without a folder.
Without a folder,
yeah,
right? Okay.
And he had to ask someone for paper. Look, the other point in this is that Hilary Benn actually stood up today and asked a very, very serious question about why not, in this current crisis, why not suspend leaving the EU for a period of time until we get through this, pandemic. And I think he was suggesting something along the lines of 6 months. And they're saying now that they're going to suspend the trade talks with the EU. How are they going to be able to conclude the business with the EU by the November, December deadline?
We have witnessed what happens when you get panic buying, and we've witnessed what happens when there are no longer goods on the shelves and interrupted flows of goods and food. Now imagine this happening again when we may, God forbid, but we may be seeing a resurgence of the virus in the months, in the coming winter months. We don't know. A vaccine hopefully is being worked on. There are good news coming from all fronts, but the clinical trials mean that we could be a year away from an actual vaccine. So are we ready to leave the EU at this stage, given the absolute chaos, pandemonium that's happening? Yeah. Also, let's not forget Ursula von der Leyen, who addressing the 27 countries, announced comprehensive measures of support
Yeah.
across the European Union for health, for businesses. We're missing out. And
Yeah,
it's an
yeah,
absolute
yeah,
tragedy that this
yeah,
is happening
yeah.
because we're talking about medical support, we're talking about research, we're talking about packages to support individuals and businesses.
Yeah.
This is not the time to be saying goodbye, but obviously ideology.
But you know, if now any of our politicians started to pipe up and say, look, you know, it's time for Scotland to be independent and all the rest of it, nothing would be done about that.
No, this is
because
not.
of
Yeah,
this,
absolutely.
You know, so I mean, I think that we have to be realistic, and you know, because of this pandemic, sadly, we are not going to be able to ask that question.
No, that question will absolutely have to be postponed until hopefully we have some very good news come through on the virus.
Yeah, but then that leads into next year. We've got elections coming up, 2021. You know, will we be ready? Will we be on a sound footing because of this?
Very good, yeah, very good question.
You know, because of the fact that we are being forced into any of the decisions that the English government make.
Yep.
And I did say the English government,
you did.
folks.
Government in Westminster.
You know, we are being forced to play their game.
We are,
and
because of obviously the virus combined with this economic pandemonium that it's causing, and that Brexit will cause, we might even see a slight change in rhetoric from Westminster trying to blame one on the other.
Yeah. I mean, make no mistake. Just as you say, if we come out the other end of this, you know, they will be able to grandstand and say, well, you wouldn't have been able to, you know, survive because, you know, without our intervention and all the rest of it, yada, yada, yada. So the whole right-wing rhetoric will get ramped up again. And it's not a defeatist attitude that I'm adopting. I'm trying to take a pragmatic stance.
Absolutely, yeah, it's true.
As to, you know, the way that I see it at this moment in time. And make no mistake, as I say, any one of our MPs pipe up and talk about independence at this moment in time.
This is not the time, yes.
They will absolutely be shot down in flames.
Let's remind all about today, Holyrood seemed actually, weirdly enough, quite united. At least in the rhetoric, we did see, you know, kindness and a spirit of togetherness from all sides.
That suits Jackson Carlaw.
Of course, it's an agenda that is observed.
Because you know, he can see that the Scottish Government are playing ball with his Westminster overlords.
Yeah.
Richard Leonard is, you know, more than happy just to, you know, smarm on the sidelines, and Willie Rennie is sitting up the back, clapping his hands with glee like an absolute, you know.
Careful.
Yeah. Okay, I'll just stop there. But yeah, you know, so they're quite happy that there's a broad consensus going around. But it has to be two ways.
Of course it does.
They have to give respect to Jean Freeman.
Absolutely, yes,
you know,
and we are yet to see solid evidence of that. And hopefully, let's wait until tomorrow. Maybe there's more magic dust coming from Westminster.
Well, there may be magic dust coming from Westminster, but I think the proof in the pudding will be obviously FMQs on Thursday.
That's right, yes.
Which, just to let the viewers know, you can watch on Broadcasting Scotland.
Exactly. And we're going on to our next piece of news. Jailed Catalan leader Dolors Bassa is in isolation in Puig de las Basses prison with coronavirus symptoms. Bassa is isolated in the prison infirmary, but it is not yet known if he has coronavirus. For Volkswagen, this was a lady, but if she has coronavirus. Volkswagen suspends production. The Volkswagen Group, the world's biggest car maker, is suspending production at factories across Europe as the coronavirus pandemic hits sales and disrupts supply chains, the company said on Tuesday. The German car maker, which owns Audi, Bentley, Bugatti, Ducati, Lamborghini, Porsche, Seat and Skoda brands, also said that uncertainty about the fallout from coronavirus meant it was impossible to give forecasts for this for its performance this year. Given the present significant deterioration in the sales situation and the heightened uncertainty regarding part supplies to our plants, production is to be suspended in the near future at factories operated by group brands, Chief Executive Herbert Diess said on Tuesday. Volkswagen's Powerful Works Council concluded it was not possible for workers to maintain a safe distance from each other to prevent contagion and recommended a suspension of production at its factories from Friday. Production will be halted at Volkswagen's Spanish plants in Setúbal in Portugal, Bratislava in Slovakia, and at the Lamborghini and Ducati plants in Italy before the end of this week, Diess said. Most of its other German and European factories will prepare to suspend production probably for 2 to 3 weeks, while Audi said separately it would halt output at its plants in Belgium, Germany, Hungary and Mexico. Volkswagen's vast factory in Puebla, Mexico, and plants in Brazil and the United States were not affected, but that would depend on how the coronavirus spreads, Volkswagen said. Volkswagen has 124 production sites worldwide, of which 72 are in Europe, with 28 in Germany alone. 2020 will be a very difficult year. The coronavirus pandemic presents us with unknown operational and financial challenges. At the same time, there are concerns about sustained economic impacts, Diess said. The Volkswagen Group sold 10.96 million vehicles last year, putting it ahead of Toyota based on the latest figures from the Japanese car maker. Globally, Volkswagen employs 671,000 people and it delivered 4.86 million vehicles to European customers in 2019. Only last month, Volkswagen predicted that vehicle deliveries this year would match 2019. The spread of coronavirus is currently impacting the global economy. It is uncertain how severely or for how long this will also last. This will also affect the Volkswagen Group. Currently, it is almost impossible to make a reliable forecast, Chief Financial Officer Frank Witter said. Sales in January and February were down about 15%, and earnings before interest and taxes in the first 3 months of the year were expected to at least half compared with the same period a year earlier, Witter said. While Volkswagen was preparing to suspend production in Europe, manufacturing was resumed in China, with the exception of plants in Kancha and Umrukwe, and the company still plans to boost its operation in the country where the coronavirus first emerged. Volkswagen Group also said its operating profit rose 22% to 16.9 billion euros, which is the equivalent of £15 billion in 2019, thanks to strong sales of higher margin cars and lower diesel charges, defying an industry downturn that has hurt rivals. Earnings were driven by higher profits at its Volkswagen, Porsche, Seat and Skoda brands and a return to profitability for its luxury sports car brand Bentley. Suspending production, obviously, this is not unexpected.
No, it's not. It certainly isn't. And, you know, the wider car market in America will be affected. Obviously, our own car market will be affected as well.
Yeah. And also with the knock-on effect from all the Brexit, and this is going to be a slow drip, isn't it? We don't know exactly which car makers are going to keep on their bases in the UK and which will have to leave.
Yeah. But you know, I would actually, I would urge any car makers possibly tuning into Broadcasting Scotland.
Yes.
Use this time to actually think about producing more electric cars, more lower emission cars.
Yes.
You know, so you know, with that workforce, and I know obviously that we're talking about people catching the contagion, but people can be innovative on their own. You know, so encourage some of the workforce to work from home, to develop better,
the designs,
designs, better capability, and more importantly, the better affordability of electric vehicles going forward. And hopefully they would have
lobby
a new market.
and liaise with governments to make it possible for people to go on and purchase these. Because you've got all sorts of issues about engine capacity, about speed, about refueling and things like that, or recharging batteries and things like that, which still at the moment are an issue. So that all needs to be resolved.
Even the wider retail schemes to make these vehicles affordable to the ordinary person in the street. I'm not talking about the people
corporate
who
sales or
would possibly live in Esher and Cobham.
But you know what? It would be an idea, perhaps, for the Scottish government to purchase a fleet of these cars to use for their own uses, or I'm not sure whether that's something like this is already in place.
Set an example, but you know, and I think there's a bus manufacturers up in Falkirk, and they're producing cleaner buses and stuff like that. You know, if they've got nothing to do, they could maybe think about designs for electric vehicles.
Research
and,
and design. This is the time to do it.
We you know, spend some time on R&D, definitely.
Yeah, there we go. And the next item is we're going to the United States. Voters in 3 states were met by glove poll workers and hand sanitizer as they cast ballots under the threat of the coronavirus pandemic on Tuesday, as Joe Biden looked to bolster his dominant lead in the Democratic U.S. presidential race. The former vice president hopes big victories in nominating contests in Florida, Illinois and Arizona can help him amass an unassailable advantage over rival Bernie Sanders in the race to choose a challenger to Republican President Donald Trump in the November 3rd election. Biden leads Sanders, a U.S. senator from Vermont, in opinion polls in all 3 states. Ohio also had been scheduled to hold a primary on Tuesday, but Governor Mike DeWine said public health concerns made in-person voting too dangerous. A state judge blocked his first effort to postpone the vote to June the 2nd, but the state health director ordered the polls shut as a health emergency late on Monday. It simply isn't possible to hold an election tomorrow that will be considered legitimate by Ohioans. DeWine and Mike LaRose, Ohio's top elections official, said in a joint statement on Monday. They mustn't be forced to choose between their health and exercising their constitutional rights. In Miami on Tuesday, poll locations, some outfitted with hand-washing stations, disinfecting wipes and portable bathrooms, appeared mostly quiet as workers wore blue gloves to avoid infection. Officials in the 3 states assured the public it was safe to vote, despite fears about the novel coronavirus, which has dramatically altered American life, forced the campaigns to halt in-person outreach, and prompted other states to postpone future contests. The states took precautions such as extending early voting hours and moving polling places away from assisted living facilities, even as some scrambled to find more poll workers to replace those who'd backed out. It looks like Bernie is getting a little bit left.
The fat lady hasn't sung yet, so you know, there's still hope for Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
And it does look like, you know, he will probably amass a sizable lead, but you know, it's again, this could get put back because of the current pandemic that you know, that America is also seeing as well. So, you know, again, this will be an ongoing story as well.
Of course it will be. And we are on to our last item, I believe, which is the labour market statistics update. Sorry, I am wrong. I do apologise. We have an item on Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe, who has been temporarily released in Iran for 2 weeks, her husband said in a statement on Tuesday. Unfortunately, Nazanin will be exceptionally required to wear an ankle tag during the furlough, which her parents have now hid from the authorities. Richard Ratcliffe said Nazanin's movement will be restricted to 300 metres from her parents' home. So she'll be able to breathe, hopefully, some fresh air. Long-awaited news. Obviously, this is not what we would like to hear. We would like to hear that she's on a flight home.
But you know, at least hopefully this will facilitate her to be able to spend some time with her family.
Yes, exactly.
Get to see her
has
daughter
a very
and
young
stuff
daughter.
like that.
We've seen the horrible pictures of her with the little girl. Heartbreaking. She has not been able to see her little girl for a long time now.
I would be interested to see the reasoning behind this sort of like 2-week holiday.
I believe it is to do with the coronavirus. They're releasing some. There was a large number.
But you know, if that's the case, then you know, it could be said that you know, if she's in her house and she's not allowed to go 300 metres from her house, why not just leave her under house arrest?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely.
You know, and then, you know, going forward, at least she's out of, you know, really some really horrendous conditions in that jail.
Let's not forget the missed opportunity of Boris Johnson's tenure at the Home Office, where the Foreign Office, where he totally overlooked the situation and resisted every attempt. He should have acted at the time.
Up to the job.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, imagine Prime Minister.
Yeah,
Let's not even.
Exactly.
So this will be it from us tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and I do apologise for some slight errors and delays. This was my very first broadcast.
Oh, I think you were absolutely wonderful.
Thank you, Chris. Please do support Broadcasting Scotland. We are an independent broadcaster, and we invite you to support us. Talk to your friend about us. Go to the to our website and register if you can. Support us with some money. It's only £5 a month, which is way less than the BBC. Or if you can't do that, don't worry. Talk about us, or come and work here. Come and volunteer here as in the technical department, in the editing department, or sitting in this chair, probably doing a much better job than I'm doing at the moment. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again tomorrow at 7. Thank you. Good night.